The mountains of eastern Tennessee held their breath in the golden hour before sunset. Gatlinburg sat nestled in the Smoky Mountains like a jewel in a velvet case, the air crisp with the scent of pine and the distant promise of autumn. For Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kane, this small tourist town represented something he hadn't experienced in 15 years of service: stillness. He walked along a quiet trail that wound through the forest behind his rented cabin, his boots silent on the carpet of fallen needles. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. At his side, moving with the same disciplined grace, was Thor. The Belgian Malinois was a compact powerhouse of lean muscle and alert intelligence, his tan and black coat catching the filtered sunlight. Thor wasn't just a dog. He was Marcus's battle buddy, his partner through 3 deployments in hostile territories where explosive detection meant the difference between life and death. Marcus watched Thor work the trail ahead, his nose processing 1,000 scents that were invisible to human awareness. The dog's training was so ingrained, it was instinct now. Check. Clear. Advance. Even here, in the peaceful Tennessee woods, Thor was on mission. "At ease, boy," Marcus murmured, his voice low and calm. Thor's ears swiveled back, acknowledging the command, but his posture remained alert. Old habits died hard for both of them. They had earned this leave. 20 days of mandatory rest after their last deployment, a brutal 6-month rotation in a desert where every shadow held potential death. Marcus carried no visible scars, but the weight in his chest, the hypervigilance that never quite shut off, those were the wounds that didn't show on any medical report. He was hoping the mountains would give him something the Navy psyche valve couldn't: peace. Thor suddenly stopped, his entire body freezing in that distinctive pointer stance. Marcus's hand moved automatically to his hip, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Then he saw what had captured Thor's attention. A doe stood 20 yards ahead, her large eyes watching them with cautious curiosity. Thor held perfectly still, his training overriding every predatory instinct. "Good boy," Marcus breathed. "Leave it." The doe bounded away into the undergrowth, and the spell broke. Thor looked back at Marcus, his dark eyes seeking approval, and Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. This was why they were here. To remember that not everything in the world was a threat. To learn how to breathe again. They returned to the cabin as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Marcus poured kibble into Thor's bowl and watched the dog eat with methodical efficiency. Thor had saved his life 7 times that he knew of. Once the dog had alerted to an IED buried beneath a false floor in a compound, sitting calmly to indicate the threat while Marcus's team evacuated. Another time, Thor had detected a suicide vest on a supposed civilian before the man could reach their convoy. 7 times. 7 lives Marcus owed to this animal who asked for nothing but food, work, and the quiet companionship of the man he served beside. Marcus sat on the porch, a cup of black coffee growing cold in his hands, and watched the first stars appear. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to think about what came after. After the Navy, after the deployments, after the missions. What did a warrior do when the war was over? The mountains offered no answers, only the whisper of wind through ancient trees and the solid, reassuring weight of Thor's head resting on his boot. Sarah Mitchell had learned to navigate the world through sound and touch long before she turned 7. Born with a degenerative vision condition, she had watched her sight fade gradually until, by her teenage years, the world existed only in shapes and shadows. Now, at 28, she moved through life with a confidence that came not from sight, but from trust. That trust had a name: Liberty. The Golden Retriever service dog was Sarah's eyes, her guardian, and her independence, all wrapped in 80 pounds of gentle, unwavering devotion. Liberty wore her vest with pride, the words, "Service Dog, Do Not Distract," emblazoned across her golden coat. She guided Sarah through crosswalks, alerted her to obstacles, retrieved dropped items, and provided the kind of constant, intuitive assistance that made Sarah's life possible. They lived in a small apartment above a bookstore on Gatlinburg's main street, a cozy space that Sarah knew by heart. Every morning, they walked the same route to the Sunrise Bakery, where Sarah worked as a baker. Her hands, denied the ability to see, had developed an extraordinary sensitivity. She could tell when bread dough had been kneaded to perfection by touch alone, could judge oven temperature by the quality of heat on her face, could decorate cakes with a precision that astonished customers who didn't know she was blind. This morning followed the familiar pattern. Sarah rose at 4:30, showered by routine, dressed by memory. Liberty was already waiting by the door, her tail sweeping the floor in a steady rhythm. "Ready to work, girl?" Sarah asked, clipping the handle to Liberty's harness. Liberty stood, her body language shifting immediately into working mode. She led Sarah down the narrow staircase with perfect precision, pausing at the bottom to ensure the path was clear, then guiding her out onto the cool morning street. The walk to the bakery took 8 minutes. Sarah counted intersections by sound, trusted Liberty's judgment at every curb. When they reached the bakery, Liberty nudged the door with her nose, and Sarah pushed it open, the bell above chiming their arrival. "Morning, Sarah," called Elena Rodriguez, the bakery's owner and Sarah's closest friend. Elena was a force of nature. A woman in her 50s who had built the Sunrise Bakery from nothing, and who treated Sarah not as someone to be pitied, but as the most talented baker in 3 counties. "Morning, Elena. Did the flour delivery come in yesterday?" "Sitting in the back, right where you left the order form. You've got a custom order for Saturday. 3-tier wedding cake. Bride wants mountain wildflowers in buttercream." Sarah smiled, her hands already reaching for her apron. "I can do that." Liberty settled into her spot behind the counter, a plush bed that Elena had bought specifically for her. The dog would wait there for hours, patient and watchful, ready to respond the instant Sarah needed her. Sarah lost herself in the work. Her hands shaped dough, measured ingredients by weight and feel, decorated with a steady confidence. She didn't need sight to create beauty. She needed touch, scent, and the deep knowledge that came from years of practice. At noon, she took her lunch break. Liberty guided her to the small park 2 blocks away, a quiet green space with benches and the sound of a fountain. Sarah sat, unwrapped her sandwich, and felt the autumn sun warm on her face. Liberty rested at her feet, ever vigilant. "You're a good girl," Sarah murmured, reaching down to stroke Liberty's soft head. "The best girl." Liberty's tail thumped against the ground. She didn't need praise, but she accepted it with the grace of a being who understood her purpose completely. Sarah didn't see the danger coming, she couldn't, but Liberty did. Carson Whitmore didn't walk into places, he arrived. At 23, he carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who had never heard the word no and meant it. His father, Richard Whitmore, owned half of Gatlinburg's commercial real estate, 3 luxury hotels, and had enough political connections to make or break careers with a phone call. Carson drove a matte black Range Rover, wore clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and treated the world like his personal playground. He had been thrown out of 2 colleges, had 3 DUIs expunged from his record, and had never faced a single meaningful consequence for any of it. He pulled up to the Sunrise Bakery at noon, flanked by his usual entourage. Blake Dennison, his childhood friend, was cut from the same privileged cloth, though with less of Carson's vicious streak. Behind them came Tyler Crane, a hanger-on who laughed at all of Carson's jokes and enabled all of his worst impulses. "This place?" Blake asked, eyeing the modest storefront with obvious disdain. "Seriously?" "Best pastries in town," Carson said, smirking. "Plus, I heard the blind chick who works here is actually hot. Wanted to see for myself." They pushed through the door, the bell's cheerful chime at odds with the energy they brought with them. Elena looked up from the register, her welcoming smile fading slightly as she assessed the new customers. "Welcome to Sunrise. What can I get for you?" Carson leaned against the counter, his eyes scanning the display cases. "What's good here?" "Everything," Elena said flatly. "The cinnamon. Rolls are fresh. So are the croissants. I'll take one of each. And a coffee. Black." Carson pulled out his wallet, flashing a thick stack of bills. "Keep the change." He handed her a $100 bill for an $8 order. It was a power move, a way of showing that money meant nothing to him. Elena took the bill without comment, made change, and slid it across the counter. Carson left it there, another statement. That's when Liberty appeared from the back room, guiding Sarah to the front. Sarah was carrying a fresh tray of scones, her movements careful and precise. Liberty stopped at the edge of the counter, positioning Sarah perfectly. "Fresh batch, Elena," Sarah said. Her face turned toward where she knew her friend would be standing. Carson's gaze locked onto Sarah, then dropped to the dog. His expression shifted, something predatory entering his eyes. Well, he said loudly. "They let dogs in here? Isn't that a health code violation?" Elena's voice turned to ice. "That's a service animal. She's legally permitted to be here." "Service animal?" Carson laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Looks like a regular dog to me. What's she service? Begging for scraps?" Sarah's face flushed, but she kept her composure. "Liberty is a trained service dog. She's certified and—" "I don't care what she is," Carson interrupted. "I'm trying to eat, and there's a dog breathing all over the food. It's disgusting." Blake shifted uncomfortably. "Carson, man, come on." "No, I'm serious. My father owns property all over this town. One call from me, and this place gets inspected top to bottom. I bet they'd find all kinds of violations." The threat hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Elena stepped forward, her body language protective. "You need to leave. Now." Carson picked up his coffee, took a deliberate sip, and smiled. "We'll leave when we're ready." He turned to go, but as he passed Sarah, he deliberately bumped into her shoulder. She stumbled, and Liberty immediately pressed against her leg, stabilizing her. "Oops," Carson said. "Not sorry at all. Didn't see you there." They left, their laughter echoing even after the door closed behind them. Sarah stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly. Elena rushed to her side. "I'm so sorry, honey." "Those entitled little—" "I'm okay," Sarah said quietly. But she wasn't. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Liberty pressed closer, sensing her handler's distress. The dog's dark eyes tracked the door where the young men had exited, a low, almost inaudible growl rumbling in her chest. Outside, Carson slid into his Range Rover, still smirking. "Did you see her face? Blind people are so easy to mess with." "That was pretty harsh, man," Blake said, though his protest was weak. "Please, people like that, they're just taking up space. She should be grateful we even acknowledged her existence." Carson started the engine. "Besides, this town needs a wake-up call. My dad's about to make some major moves here, and anyone who doesn't get with the program is going to regret it." He didn't know that across the street, sitting at an outdoor table with an untouched cup of coffee, a man with pale blue eyes and the stillness of a predator had watched the entire interaction. Marcus Kane had been enjoying the afternoon sun when the three young men had entered the bakery. He had seen the confrontation through the window. He had heard the raised voices, and he had made note of every detail. The license plate of the Range Rover, the faces, the body language of casual, entitled cruelty. Thor, lying at his feet, had sensed the shift in Marcus's energy. The dog lifted his head, ears forward, waiting for a command. "Easy?" Marcus murmured. But his eyes never left the departing vehicle. He had come to Tennessee seeking peace, but old instincts were hard to silence. And what he had just witnessed was not the behavior of stupid kids making a mistake. It was the behavior of predators who had never been stopped. That would change. The next 48 hours passed in deceptive quiet. Marcus continued his routine, walks with Thor, mornings at the small gym on the edge of town, afternoons reading on his porch. But now his walks included a stop at the bakery for coffee. He introduced himself to Elena, complimented the pastries, and made himself a familiar face. He learned Sarah's schedule. He learned about Liberty. He learned that Elena was fiercely protective of Sarah, treating her like the daughter she'd never had. And he watched. Carson Whitmore was not subtle. His black Range Rover appeared on the main street multiple times a day. He held court at the expensive steakhouse his father owned, surrounded by his friends and hangers-on. He was loud, arrogant, and utterly secure in his untouchability. On the third day, Marcus saw Carson and his friends outside a coffee shop, hassling a street musician who was playing guitar for tips. Carson had, accidentally, kicked over the man's guitar case, scattering bills and coins across the sidewalk, then laughed as the musician scrambled to collect his earnings. No one intervened. People looked away, crossed the street, pretended not to see. This was the pattern of a small town where one family had too much power and everyone else had learned to look the other way. Marcus filed it all away. He was building a profile, understanding the enemy. Because that's what this had become, an enemy. On Thursday evening, Sarah left the bakery later than usual. She had been working on the wedding cake, the intricate buttercream wildflowers requiring hours of careful, precise work. Elena had left at 6, trusting Sarah to lock up. Sarah finished at 8, exhausted but satisfied. Liberty guided her out the back door into the small alley where the bakery kept its dumpsters. It was the same route Sarah took every night, the same familiar path. She didn't see the shadow detach from the wall. Carson had been waiting. For 2 hours, a paper bag clutched in his hand. Inside were 6 raw chicken breasts, each one laced with a heavy dose of xylitol, a sweetener that was deadly to dogs, even in small amounts. He had researched it carefully. He wanted this to hurt. As Sarah and Liberty emerged, Carson stepped forward. "Hey, blind girl." Sarah froze, her hand tightening on Liberty's harness. She knew that voice. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," Carson continued, his tone mock-friendly. "I feel bad about how it went. I want to apologize." He held up the bag. "I even brought a peace offering. Treats for your dog." "I don't want anything from you," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear climbing her throat. "Liberty doesn't eat food from strangers." "Come on, don't be like that." Carson moved closer. Liberty positioned herself between them, a low growl starting in her chest. "See? Even your dog knows you're being rude." He reached into the bag and pulled out a piece of chicken. "Here, girl. Nice doggy." "Don't." Sarah's voice rose in panic. "She's working. You can't." But Carson had already tossed the chicken. It landed at Liberty's feet. The dog's training was absolute. She ignored it completely, her focus remaining on Sarah. Carson's expression darkened. "Stupid moot." "Fine." He tossed another piece. Then another. He scattered all 6 pieces around them, poisoned meat littering the alley. "Oops," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Looks like I made a mess. Better hope your dog doesn't eat any of that. Would be a shame if something happened to her." He turned and walked away, his laughter echoing off the brick walls. Sarah stood frozen, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She couldn't see the meat, she didn't know where it was or how much there was. And Liberty, trained to alert her to obstacles, wouldn't understand that the food itself was the danger. "Liberty, heel," Sarah commanded, her voice shaking. "Heel, girl. Stay close." But as Sarah took a step forward, her shoe caught on uneven pavement. She stumbled, and her grip on the harness loosened for just a second. Liberty, sensing her handler's distress, moved to steady her, and in that movement the dog's nose found one of the pieces of chicken. Liberty's training was excellent, but she was still a dog. And the scent of fresh chicken, combined with the stress of the situation, overwhelmed her discipline for just one fatal second. She ate it. Sarah heard the sound, the soft gulp of swallowing, and her heart stopped. "No, no, Liberty, no." She dropped to her knees, her hands frantically searching, finding Liberty's face, trying to make the dog drop whatever else she might have in her mouth. But it was too late. Liberty had consumed approximately 3 ounces of poisoned meat. The toxin began its work immediately. Marcus was 2 blocks away when he heard the scream. He moved without thought, Thor beside him, both of them covering the distance to the alley in seconds. He found Sarah on her knees, sobbing, her hands on Liberty's sides. The dog was standing, but her legs were trembling, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Marcus took in the scene instantly. The scattered meat, the empty bag on the ground, Sarah's terror. What happened? His voice was calm, cutting through her panic. She ate something. I think it's poisoned. Sarah's words tumbled over each other. I can't see it. I don't know how much. Marcus was already moving. He knelt beside Liberty, running his hands over her body with the practiced efficiency of someone trained in field medicine. Thor stood back, alert but calm, understanding this was not his moment. How long ago? 2 minutes? Maybe 3. Okay, listen to me. Marcus's voice was the steady anchor Sarah desperately needed. I'm Marcus. I'm going to help. Where's the nearest emergency vet? Mountain View Animal Hospital. 20 minutes. Too far. We need to induce vomiting now. He looked around, spotted a convenience store across the street. Stay with her. Keep her calm. I'll be right back. He sprinted across the street, Thor at his heels, and returned 90 seconds later with a bottle of hydrogen peroxide. He knelt again, his movements precise and controlled. I'm going to make her vomit. It's going to be unpleasant, but it's her best chance. Do you trust me? Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. Please save her. Please. Marcus forced the correct dosage down Liberty's throat. Within 2 minutes, the dog was retching violently, her body convulsing as she expelled the contents of her stomach. Marcus watched carefully, his hands supporting her, his eyes cataloging every symptom. When the vomiting stopped, Liberty was weak but breathing more steadily. Marcus scooped her into his arms. My truck is around the corner. We're going to that hospital. Now. Sarah scrambled to her feet. I can't see. Take my arm. His voice left. No room for argument. She gripped his bicep, and he guided her with the same efficient care he'd shown the dog, Thor leading the way. They made it to his truck in under a minute. Marcus laid Liberty in the back seat, helped Sarah in beside her, and drove. He called ahead to the animal hospital, his tone clipped and commanding, ensuring they were ready for an emergency intake. The 20-minute drive took 14. Marcus pulled up to the emergency entrance, carried Liberty inside with Sarah clinging to his arm, and handed the dog off to the waiting veterinary team. Xylitol poisoning, he told the vet, a woman in her 50s with kind but serious eyes. She ingested approximately 3 ounces of contaminated chicken about 20 minutes ago. I induced emesis with hydrogen peroxide immediately. She expelled significant material, but I don't know how much toxin entered her system. The vet looked at him with new respect. You may have saved her life. We'll get her stabilized and start IV fluids and liver protectants. The next 6 hours are critical. They took Liberty away on a gurney. Sarah stood in the waiting room, trembling, her world shattered. Marcus guided her to a chair, his hand on her shoulder steady and grounding. She's going to fight, he said. She's strong, and we got the poison out fast. You need to breathe. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps. Who would do this? Why? Marcus's expression went cold. He had seen the empty bag in the alley. He had seen the deliberate pattern of scattered meat. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. Every detail. And Sarah, her voice breaking, told him about Carson Whitmore. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt. He simply absorbed every word, his mind cataloging, strategizing, planning. When she finished, he made a call. Deacon? It's Kane. I need a full workup on someone. Name is Carson Whitmore. Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I need everything. Father too. Richard Whitmore. I need it by morning. He ended the call and looked at Sarah. I'm going to fix this. How? Her voice was hollow. He's untouchable. His father owns half this town. Marcus's smile was cold and sharp. I've fought warlords and terrorists in places where power meant everything. Trust me. No one is untouchable. In the quiet of the animal hospital, with Liberty fighting for her life in the next room, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. The first 48 hours after the poisoning, Marcus became Sarah's shadow. He drove her to the hospital for updates. He sat with her in the waiting room while Liberty fought through toxin-induced liver damage. He called Elena to explain why Sarah wouldn't be at work. He handled the logistics of crisis with the calm efficiency of someone who had managed far worse in far more hostile environments. Liberty survived. The dog's youth and strength, combined with Marcus's rapid intervention, saved her life. But she was weak, requiring IV fluids, medication, and constant monitoring. On the third day, the vet released Liberty with strict instructions, 2 weeks of rest, medications 3 times daily, no stress, no work. For a service dog, being unable to work was its own kind of torture. For Sarah, losing Liberty's guidance even temporarily was devastating. Elena arranged for Sarah to stay in the apartment above the bakery, where she could move around safely in a known environment. Marcus drove her home, carried Liberty upstairs in his arms, and helped Sarah get settled. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah said, her hands finding Liberty's soft fur. The dog was resting on her bed, her tail giving a weak thump of recognition. "You don't need to thank me," Marcus replied. "Just focus on getting her healthy. But I can't do this alone. Without Liberty, I can't work. I can barely leave the apartment. Her voice broke. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he made a decision that would change everything. "You're not alone. I'll help. You've already done so much. I'm on leave for 2 more weeks. I've got time." He glanced at Thor, who was lying calmly by the door. "And Thor needs to keep his skills sharp. Let me train with you. We'll work on basic guide commands. It'll be good for both of us." Sarah's face showed a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. "You'd do that?" "I would." What Marcus didn't tell her was that he was also conducting reconnaissance, because while Sarah rested and Liberty recovered, Marcus was hunting. He had received Deacon's full report within 12 hours of his call. David Deacon Chen was a former teammate, now working in private security and intelligence. His report on the Whitmore family was comprehensive and damning. Richard Whitmore had built his fortune through a combination of legitimate real estate development and deeply questionable business practices. His properties had a pattern. He bought struggling businesses in small towns, pressured them to sell through code violations and selective enforcement, then demolished them for luxury development. Local officials consistently looked the other way, thanks to campaign contributions and well-timed consulting fees. Carson Whitmore was the heir apparent, currently working in his father's company. His record had been scrubbed clean multiple times. DUIs, assault charges, property destruction, all of it buried by expensive lawyers and family connections. But Deacon had found the pattern. Carson had a history of animal cruelty. A dog accidentally killed when Carson was 16. Another tragic incident with a neighbor's cat in college. Both times, settlements had been reached quietly. This wasn't a one-time act of cruelty. This was pathology. Marcus studied the report with the focused intensity he usually reserved for mission briefs. The enemy was identified. The threat was clear. Now he needed evidence. He began his surveillance on day 4. Carson Whitmore was a creature of habit. He brunched at his father's steakhouse every Saturday at 11. He spent afternoons at a private gym where membership cost more than most people's mortgages. He frequented 3 bars in rotation, always surrounded by his entourage. Marcus watched all of it. Thor at his side, he became part of the town's landscape, invisible in his ordinariness. He ran the same trails Carson jogged. He ate at the restaurants Carson favored. He learned the patterns. On the 8th day, Marcus made his first direct contact. He walked into the steakhouse at noon, Thor in his service vest. The hostess started to object until she saw the vest, then grudgingly showed him to a table in the back. Carson was holding court at a large booth, 3 of his friends laughing at something he'd said. Marcus sat 2 tables away, ordered a coffee, and waited. It didn't take long. Carson noticed Thor, and his face twisted into something ugly and gleeful. He stood up, walked over to Marcus's table, and leaned down. "Nice dog, Carson," said, his tone mocking. "Another one of those service animals?" Marcus looked up slowly. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, but his eyes were chips of blue ice. "He is. What's he service? PTSD?" Carson laughed. "You one of those broken soldiers who can't handle real life?" Marcus didn't react. He simply held Carson's gaze, his body language utterly relaxed, and said in a voice of absolute calm, "You should go back to your friends." If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. Something in that voice made Carson hesitate. He was used to people backing down, showing fear, getting defensive. Marcus showed nothing. He was a still pool of water, and beneath that surface, Carson sensed something that his primitive hindbrain recognized as danger. "Whatever," Carson muttered, and retreated to his booth. But he kept glancing over, and Marcus kept watching him with that same calm, patient expression. The message was sent. Marcus Kane was no longer a stranger. He was a presence, and he was not intimidated. That evening, Marcus received the call he'd been waiting for. "Kane, it's Deacon. I found something." "Tell me." Carson Whitmore's credit card. 3 days before the poisoning, he purchased xylitol from an online supplier. 2-pound bag, shipped overnight to his address. That's not a casual purchase. That's premeditation. Marcus felt the cold certainty settle in his chest. This was no longer about protecting Sarah, or even about justice for liberty. This was about stopping a predator before he struck again. "Get me a copy of the receipt. Everything. I need it documented. Already in your encrypted email. Kane, what are you planning?" "What I always do," Marcus said quietly. "Completing the mission." The next morning, Marcus drove Sarah to the bakery for her first day back. Liberty was still too weak to work, but Sarah insisted she needed to try. Marcus walked her inside, Thor guiding both of them. Elena rushed over, hugging Sarah tightly. "Honey, are you sure you're ready?" "I need to work, Elena." "I can't just sit home," Marcus spoke up. "I'll stay. Thor and I will be right here if you need anything." He sat up at a corner table with his laptop and coffee. To any observer, he was just a customer working remotely. But his eyes constantly tracked the entrance, the windows, the alley door. At 2 p.m., Carson Whitmore walked in. The temperature in the bakery dropped 10 degrees. Elena's hand moved toward her phone, ready to call the police. Sarah, behind the counter, froze, her hand stilling on the cake she'd been decorating by touch. Carson smiled, that same arrogant, cruel smile. He walked directly to the counter and leaned on it. "Heard your dog got sick," he said loudly. "That's too bad. You really should be more careful about what you let her eat." The taunt was unmistakable, the confession barely veiled. Sarah's face went white, her hands trembled, but before she could speak, Marcus stood up. He moved with the fluid ease of water flowing downhill, crossing the bakery in seconds. He positioned himself between Carson and Sarah, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried with the authority of someone who had commanded men in combat. "You need to leave." Carson turned, recognizing Marcus from the steakhouse. His smile widened. "Oh, look, the broken soldier. What are you going to do? Have your dog bite me?" Thor sat at Marcus's heel, perfectly still, perfectly trained. A weapon awaiting orders. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. He simply said, with the calm certainty of someone stating an immutable fact, "I know what you did. I have proof. And you're going to walk out that door right now, or I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly who and what you are." For the first time, real fear flickered across Carson's face. He looked into Marcus's eyes and saw something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't bluster. This was truth. "You can't prove anything," Carson said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Online purchase, xylitol, 2 pounds, ordered 3 days before you poisoned a service dog. Your credit card, your shipping address. I have the receipts. I have witness statements. I have a timeline." Marcus took a single step forward. Carson involuntarily stepped back. "So here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, his voice dropping even lower. "You're going to leave. You're going to stay away from Sarah, away from liberty, away from this bakery, and you're going to pray that I decide you're not worth the effort of destroying." Carson's face had gone pale. He looked around wildly, seeing Elena on her phone, seeing the other customers watching, seeing that he was suddenly very alone. He backed toward the door, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "My father will hear about this." "I hope he does," Marcus said, "because my next conversation is with him." Carson fled. The bakery erupted in quiet applause from the customers who had witnessed the confrontation. Elena rushed around the counter to hug Sarah, who was shaking but smiling. Marcus returned to his table as if nothing had happened. Thor settled at his feet, and Marcus pulled out his phone. The hunt was on. Richard Whitmore's office occupied the entire top floor of the Whitmore Plaza, a gleaming steel and glass monument to his success. The waiting room was all marble and leather, designed to intimidate. Marcus walked in at 9 a.m., Thor at his side, and approached the receptionist, Marcus Kane, to see Richard Whitmore. The woman, professionally pleasant but clearly trained to gatekeep, barely looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see me." "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore is very busy." Marcus placed a folder on her desk. "Give him this. Tell him it's regarding his son. He'll make time." Something in his tone made her pick up the folder and walk it back to the inner office. 60 seconds later, she returned, her professional mask slipping into uncertainty. "Mr. Whitmore will see you now." Richard Whitmore's office was designed to project power. The man behind the massive desk matched the decor. Mid-50s, perfectly groomed, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He looked at Marcus with the assessing gaze of someone used to measuring opponents. "Mr. Kane, my receptionist said this was urgent regarding my son." Marcus didn't sit, despite the gesture toward a chair. He simply stood, Thor beside him, and said, "Your son poisoned a service dog 9 days ago. Premeditated. I have proof." Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Marcus opened the folder he'd carried in, laying out documents on Richard's pristine desk. Online purchase receipt for xylitol, a substance lethal to dogs. Shipped to your son's address. Security footage from the bakery showing him delivering the threat. Veterinary records documenting the poisoning. Witness testimony. Richard looked at the documents, his face carefully neutral. Then he looked up at Marcus, and for the first time, there was a hint of steel in his voice. "Even if this were true, which I'm not conceding, my son is an adult. Any legal issues would be between him and the authorities." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus said, his voice quiet but edged with something dangerous. "See, your son doesn't operate alone. He operates with the confidence that comes from a lifetime of you making his problems disappear. Every DUI, every assault charge, every incident of animal cruelty, you've buried them all." Richard's expression hardened. "You need to be very careful about making accusations against me, Mr. Kane." "I'm not making accusations. I'm giving you one chance to handle this internally before it becomes external." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I'm not some small-town business owner you can intimidate. I'm a Navy SEAL who specializes in taking down people who think they're untouchable. And right now, I'm giving you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "Your son pays for Liberty's medical bills, every penny. He makes a formal public apology to Sarah Mitchell. He stays away from her, from the bakery, from that part of town. And he gets serious help for whatever is wrong with him that makes him hurt defenseless animals. And if I refuse?" Marcus's smile was cold. "Then I take this folder to the district attorney, the state veterinary board, the FBI's animal cruelty division, and every news outlet in Tennessee. Your son goes to prison. Your business dealings get scrutinized, and I make sure everyone knows that Richard Whitmore protects animal abusers." The office was silent. Richard Whitmore was a man used to winning through money, connections, and intimidation. Marcus represented something he couldn't buy or threaten. Finally, Richard spoke. "I need to speak with my son." "You have 24 hours, Marcus said. "After that, the folder goes public." He turned to leave, Thor rising smoothly beside him. At the door, he paused and looked back. "One more thing, Mr. Whitmore. If anything happens to Sarah Mitchell, if she has any accidents, if her business suffers any mysterious problems, if Liberty has any further health issues, I will know, and I will end you. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Marcus walked out, leaving Richard Whitmore sitting at his desk, staring at the evidence of his son's cruelty, calculating his next move. Carson Whitmore's emergency call to his father had been panicked, incoherent. Richard's response had been swift and cold. "My office. Now." Carson sat in his father's expansive office, slouched in a chair, trying to maintain his usual arrogance. But his father's expression was carved from granite. "Is it true?" Richard asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is what true?" "That soldier is making up." Richard slammed the folder onto the desk. "Did you poison that woman's service dog?" Carson's mouth opened and closed. He had never seen his father truly angry before. Disappointed, yes. Irritated, frequently. But this cold fury was new and terrifying. "It was just a dog, Dad. Just some blind girl's—" The slap came out of nowhere, sharp and shocking. Carson's head snapped to the side, his hand flying to his cheek. "That soldier is a Navy SEAL," Richard said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Do you understand what that means? He's not some local nobody I can pay off or intimidate. He's a trained, special warfare operator who has killed terrorists in 12 different countries. And you stupid, arrogant child, have given him a mission." Carson stared at his father in shock. He had never been struck before, never been spoken to like this. "I've spent 30 years building this business," Richard continued. 30 years of careful planning, strategic relationships, calculated risks. And you, in one moment of casual cruelty, have put it all at risk. I didn't think. No, you didn't think. You never think, because I've always fixed your messes. But this? He gestured at the folder. "This I can't fix by throwing money at it. This man wants justice, and he has the skills and determination to get it." Richard picked up his phone. "I'm calling our lawyer. You're going to do exactly what that SEAL told you to do. You're going to pay the vet bills. You're going to apologize. And you're going to get help." "But Dad, no." Richard's voice was final. "This is not a negotiation, because if you don't do this, he'll destroy you. And I will let him." The next day, Sarah received a call from the animal hospital. An anonymous benefactor had paid her bill in full. The amount was staggering, nearly $15,000 covering Liberty's emergency care, medications, and follow-up treatments. 2 hours later, there was a knock on her apartment door. Marcus answered it, his body blocking the entrance. Carson Whitmore stood there, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine fear or might just have been fear of consequences. "I'm here to apologize," he said, his voice flat. Marcus didn't move. "Sarah doesn't need to hear from you. Please, I need to say this." Sarah's voice came from behind Marcus. "Let him speak." Marcus stepped aside, but he didn't leave. He stood behind Sarah, his presence a clear warning. Carson looked at Sarah, at the dog recovering on the bed behind her, and for the first time, something that might have been shame crossed his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "What I did was cruel and indefensible. I poisoned Liberty. I did it deliberately because I thought it would be funny, because I didn't see you or your dog as mattering. I was wrong. I'm getting help, professional help, and I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." The apology sounded rehearsed, lawyer-written. But underneath it, there was a tremor of genuine fear. The kind of fear that comes from realizing, perhaps for the first time, that actions have consequences. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she said simply, "I hope you mean that. Because what you did didn't just hurt Liberty. It hurt me. It took away my independence, my safety. It was an attack on my life." "I know," Carson whispered. "I'm sorry." Marcus spoke, his voice cold. "The apology is heard. Now you leave. You stay away from Sarah, away from the bakery, away from this street. If I see you within 2 blocks of her, the deal is off, and everything goes public. Understood?" Carson nodded, his eyes not meeting Marcus's. He turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Sarah let out a long, shaky breath. "Is it really over?" Marcus looked at her, and for the first time, his expression softened. "It's over. You're safe." She turned toward him, and even though she couldn't see his face, she reached out and found his hand. "Who are you, Marcus Kane?" Just someone who couldn't walk away. But they both knew that was a lie. He was so much more than that. He was her guardian, her protector, her ghost, who had stepped out of the shadows when she needed him most. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a rhythm that felt both surreal and comforting. Marcus continued to stay in Gatlinburg, extending his leave through unofficial channels that only someone with his service record could access. He spent his mornings training Thor to work basic guide commands, and his afternoons helping Sarah navigate her world while Liberty continued to recover. It was in those quiet hours that they truly began to know each other. Sarah learned that Marcus had been in the Navy for 15 years, that he had deployed to places he couldn't name to do things he couldn't describe. She learned that Thor had saved his life more times than he could count, that the bond between operator and K9 was forged in fire and blood. Marcus learned that Sarah had lost her sight gradually, that she had fought against every limitation, that she had built a life of purpose and meaning through sheer determination. He learned that she could identify every type of flower by scent alone, that she decorated cakes with a precision that put sighted bakers to shame, that her disability had never been a limitation in her mind, only in the minds of others. Liberty recovered slowly, but completely. The dog's strength returned, her energy rebounded, and by the end of the second week, she was ready to work again. On Liberty's first day back in harness, Marcus walked with Sarah and Liberty to the bakery. The town had changed in subtle ways. Carson Whitmore had disappeared, enrolled in a treatment facility in another state. Richard Whitmore had made a substantial anonymous donation to service dog organizations. The Whisper network that ran through small towns had done its work. Everyone knew that Sarah Mitchell had a guardian, and that guardian was not someone to be trifled with. At the bakery door, Sarah paused. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." "You don't need to. When do you have to go back?" Marcus hesitated. He had been thinking about that question for days. His leave was technically over. His team was stateside now, preparing for the next rotation. But standing here, in this small town, watching this strong woman reclaim her life, he realized something profound. He had spent 15 years protecting strangers in foreign lands. Maybe it was time to protect people he actually knew. "I'm not sure yet," he said. "I'm thinking about some changes." Sarah smiled, the first truly open, joyful smile he had seen from her. "I hope those changes keep you close." Inside the bakery, Elena Rodriguez watched through the window and smiled. She had seen the way Marcus looked at Sarah when he thought no one was watching. She had seen the way Sarah's face lit up when Marcus walked in. Some guardians were temporary, some stayed. Marcus Kane looked like he might be the staying kind. 3 weeks after Carson's apology, Marcus received a call that changed everything. It was from David Deacon Chen, his former teammate and now private intelligence analyst. Deacon's voice was tight with concern. "Kane, we've got a problem." Marcus was at his cabin, Thor at his feet. He instantly went on alert. "Talk to me." "I kept monitoring the Whitmore family after your confrontation. Call it due diligence. And I found something. Richard Whitmore has been making some interesting calls. Specifically, to someone you're going to want to know about." "Who?" "Jacob Reeves. Does that name mean anything to you?" Marcus felt ice form in his veins. "Yeah, it means something." Jacob Reeves was a fixer. Not the Hollywood version, the real kind. He specialized in making problems disappear. Witnesses who changed their stories. Evidence that vanished. Accidents that happened to people who threatened powerful clients. He had operated in the shadows for 20 years, connected to organized crime, corrupt politicians, and anyone with enough money to pay his fees. And if Richard Whitmore had called him, Sarah was still in danger. "What do you have?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping into mission mode. 3 phone calls over the past week. The last one was yesterday. I couldn't decrypt the content, but the pattern is clear. Whitmore is setting something up. Can you get me more? I'm trying, But Reeves is careful, uses burner phones, encrypted apps, the whole 9 yards. But Kane? Deacon's voice became serious. If Reeves is involved, this isn't going to be clean. He doesn't do intimidation. He does permanent solutions. Marcus stood up, his mind already running through tactical scenarios. How fast can you get to Tennessee? 12 hours. You want the team? Marcus thought about it. His old team was scattered now, some retired, some still active. But there were 3 he could call on. Deacon for intelligence, Marco Jester Rossi for tactical support, and Liam Spectre Gallagher for overwatch. Get me Jester and Spectre if they're available. This might require more than words. Copy that. Kane, be careful. Reeves has a body count. So do I, Marcus said, and ended the call. He immediately called Sarah. Where are you? At the bakery. Why? What's wrong? Don't leave. I'm coming to you. And Sarah? Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in but me. Marcus, you're scaring me. Good. Stay scared. Stay alert. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He grabbed his go bag, the one he always kept packed with equipment that was technically illegal for a civilian to possess, but that he had never turned in. Thor was already at the door, sensing the shift in energy. As Marcus drove to town, his phone buzzed with an incoming encrypted message. It was from Deacon, and it was just 2 words and an attachment. Found something. Marcus pulled over, opened the attachment. It was a transcript of a phone conversation between Richard Whitmore and Jacob Reeves from 2 days ago. His blood ran cold as he read it. Richard, I need the situation handled. Permanently. Reeves, the woman? Richard, and anyone protecting her, make it look like an accident, a break-in gone wrong. I don't care. Just make it stop. Reeves, that's going to cost you. Richard, I don't care about the cost. I care about results. My son is in a facility because of this. My business is being scrutinized. I want them gone. Reeves, 2 targets, 1 week. Usual terms. Richard, done. 1 week. The call had been 2 days ago. That meant Marcus had 5 days before Reeves made his move. Or maybe less. He pulled back onto the road, driving faster now. When he reached the bakery, he parked illegally right in front, ran inside with Thor, and found Sarah behind the counter, her face pale. What's happening? She asked. Marcus took her hand, grounding her. Richard Whitmore hired someone, a professional, to hurt you. The color drained completely from Sarah's face, but Carson apologized. The bills were paid. I thought. Richard doesn't care about justice. He cares about control. And right now, you represent a threat to his power. Marcus squeezed her hand. But I'm not going to let anything happen to you. My team is coming. We're going to end this. Elena had been listening from the back. She came forward, her face set in determined lines. What do you need from us? Marcus looked at these 2 women, neither of them trained for this kind of threat, both of them showing the kind of courage that came from having no choice but to be brave. I need you both to follow my instructions exactly. No questions, no hesitation. Can you do that? They both nodded. Good, Marcus said, because we're about to turn this bakery into a fortress. Within 12 hours, Deacon, Jester, and Spectre arrived in Gatlinburg in unmarked vehicles, carrying equipment that would have made even the most paranoid prepper jealous. David Deacon Chen set up his mobile command center in Sarah's apartment above the bakery. Within an hour, he had hacked into the town's security camera network, set up motion sensors around the perimeter, and installed encrypted communications that allowed the team to coordinate. Marco Jester Rossi, the massive, cheerful breacher, took one look at the bakery's doors and windows and immediately began reinforcing them. Steel bars, shatter-resistant film on the glass, hidden panic buttons. He worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that fortifications saved lives. Liam Spectre Gallagher, the team sniper, disappeared into the building across the street. Within hours, he had set up an overwatch position with clear sightlines to every approach to the bakery. His rifle, a custom-built piece that could put a round through a target at 800 yards, was hidden but ready. Marcus coordinated it all. He was in his element now, no longer the civilian on leave but the operator running a mission. And his mission was clear: protect Sarah Mitchell and eliminate the threat. Elena watched the transformation of her bakery with a mixture of awe and terror. "Is this really necessary?" she asked. Deacon looked up from his laptop. "Jacob Reeves has 17 confirmed kills that we know about, probably twice that many we don't. He's a ghost. He doesn't fail. So, yes, ma'am. This is necessary." Sarah sat at the counter, Liberty at her feet, and listened to the activity swirling around her. She couldn't see the preparations, but she could feel them. The weight of armed protection. The intensity of men trained for war, now focused on her safety. "I feel like I've dropped into a movie," she said quietly. Marcus sat down beside her. "I know this is overwhelming, but this is what I do. This is what we do. And I promise you, when this is over, you'll be safe." "How can you be sure?" "Because Jacob Reeves is good, but we're better, and he's used to civilians who can't fight back. We're Navy SEALs, we're not civilians." Over the next 48 hours, the team worked in shifts. They identified every potential infiltration point. They mapped Reeves's likely approaches. They established protocols for Sarah's movements, ensuring she was never alone, never exposed. Deacon's intelligence work paid off. He found Reeves's credit card transactions in nearby towns. The man was close, doing his own reconnaissance. "He's using a motel in Pigeon Forge," Deacon reported, 20 miles away. "He's been there for 2 days, scouting." Marcus studied the tactical map Deacon had created. He'll make his move at night, probably in the next 72 hours. He'll want to make it look random, a burglary gone wrong. "So we let him come to us?" Jester asked. "We let him think he's coming to us," Marcus corrected. "But we'll be ready, and when he makes his move, we take him down." Spector's voice came over the comms from his overwatch position. "Copy. That, I've got eyes on all approaches. If he shows, I'll see him." They settled in to wait. In special operations, patience was as important as aggression. You waited for the enemy to expose himself, and then you struck with overwhelming force. Sarah tried to maintain normalcy. She worked in the bakery during the day, though the foot traffic had been discouraged by the obvious security presence. She baked, decorated, and tried to keep her hands busy. But at night, lying in her apartment with Liberty beside her and Marcus on watch in the living room, she felt the weight of waiting. "Tell me about Thor," she said one night, breaking the silence. Marcus was sitting by the window, his rifle within reach, his eyes scanning the street. Thor was at his feet. "What do you want to know? How did you meet him?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then began to speak. "I was assigned to him 5 years ago. He was 2 years old, already trained in explosive detection. Our first mission together was in Afghanistan. We were clearing a compound, and Thor alerted to a wall. Standard procedure says we mark it and move on. But something about the way he was sitting, the intensity of his focus, told me it was more than just residue." "What was it?" "A false wall hiding 15 pounds of C4 rigged to blow when we opened the next door. If we'd gone through, it would have killed everyone in the squad." Marcus reached down, stroking Thor's head. "He saved 12 lives that day, and he's done it over and over since. Like you saved Liberty." "Liberty didn't need saving, she needed an assist. There's a difference." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "You don't take compliments well." "Never learned how." They fell into comfortable silence, and Sarah realized something profound. She felt safe. Not just physically protected, though that was certainly true, but truly safe in the deepest sense. Protected not just by Marcus's skills, but by his presence. Whatever happened next, she wasn't facing it alone. Jacob Reeves made his move on night 3 at 2:47 a.m. He came as a ghost, dressed in black, his face obscured, carrying tools of his trade. Lockpicks, a suppressed pistol, chloroform. He had studied the target. Blind woman, service dog, possibly a man staying in the apartment, but likely just a boyfriend, not a threat. He was wrong about everything. Spector saw him first from his overwatch position. "Ghost actual, I have eyes on a single male, approaching from the north alley. Black clothing, tactical movement. This is our guy." Marcus's voice came back immediately, calm and controlled. "Copy. Let him commit. I want him inside." Sarah was in her bedroom, Liberty beside her, both of them awake despite the hour. She heard Marcus's whispered command through the wall, "Stay put. Do not come out, no matter what you hear." Reeves approached the back door. His lock-picking skills were excellent. He had the door open in under 30 seconds and slipped inside, silent as smoke. He moved. Through the darkened bakery kitchen, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. The stairs to the apartment were ahead. He placed his foot on the first step. That's when the lights exploded on, blinding him. And that's when he realized he had walked into an ambush. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, his rifle trained on Reeves's center mass. To the left, Jester had emerged from the storage room, a shotgun leveled. To the right, Deacon had appeared from behind the counter, his pistol steady. 3 weapons, 3 trained operators, 1 target. "Federal agents, drop your weapon and get on the ground." Marcus's command voice filled the space with authority. Reeves was a professional. He didn't panic. He assessed his options in a fraction of a second, calculated the angles, and realized he had none. He was in a fatal funnel, outnumbered and outgunned. Slowly, he raised his hands. "I don't know what you think this is." "Jacob Reeves," Marcus said, descending the stairs, his rifle never wavering. "Wanted on 3 state warrants for murder for hire. You're under arrest." That's when Reeves made his fatal mistake. He went for his gun. He was fast. But Marcus was faster. A single shot, non-lethal, caught Reeves in the shoulder. The man's gun clattered to the floor. He dropped to his knees, clutching the wound, his face twisted in pain and rage. Jester moved in, zip-tying Reeves's hands behind his back with brutal efficiency. "Clear," he called out. Marcus climbed the stairs, keeping his rifle trained on the downed intruder. He keyed his comms. "Sarah, it's over. You're safe." The door to the bedroom opened. Sarah stepped out, Liberty at her side. She was pale, but composed. Is he? Alive, wounded, and about to answer a lot of questions. Deacon was already on his phone, not calling local police, but contacting federal marshals through encrypted channels. This wasn't going to be a local arrest. This was going to be federal. Within 30 minutes, unmarked vehicles arrived. Federal agents in plain clothes took custody of Jacob Reeves, read him his rights, and transported him away. The lead agent, a woman named Torres who had worked with Marcus's team before, pulled him aside. "The evidence you provided on Richard Whitmore is solid. We've been building a RICO case on him for 2 years. This is the break we needed." "What happens to Sarah?" Marcus asked. "She's a witness now. We'll protect her. But more than that, once Reeves talks, and he will, Richard Whitmore is going to have bigger problems than revenge. He's looking at federal charges. Conspiracy to commit murder. He'll be lucky if he sees daylight before he's 90. As the sun rose over Gatlinburg, the team packed up their equipment. The fortress was dismantled. The surveillance was removed. The bakery returned to being just a bakery, but the people inside it had changed forever. The unraveling of Richard Whitmore's empire took 6 weeks and was spectacular in its totality. Jacob Reeves, facing multiple federal charges and life in prison, made a deal. He provided detailed testimony about Richard Whitmore's instructions, including recorded phone calls he had kept as insurance. Federal prosecutors moved swiftly. Richard Whitmore was indicted on conspiracy to commit murder, bribery, racketeering, and a dozen other charges. His assets were frozen. His business empire began to collapse as investors fled and partners distanced themselves. The media descended on Gatlinburg. The story had everything: wealthy developer, hired killer, Navy SEAL guardian, blind woman, and her service dog. It became national news. But Sarah Mitchell refused to be the victim in the narrative. When reporters sought interviews, she gave one statement: "I am not defined by what was done to me. I'm defined by what I do next. And what I do next is live my life fully, bake beautiful cakes, and be grateful for the people who stood beside me when I needed them most." Carson Whitmore, still in treatment, was not charged. The district attorney decided that his cooperation and genuine effort at rehabilitation warranted a second chance. But his life was forever marked. He would never escape what he had done. In the end, justice was served not through violence or revenge, but through the careful, deliberate application of law, supported by evidence that couldn't be denied. Richard Whitmore was convicted on all counts. He received a 30-year sentence. He would die in prison. Jacob Reeves received life without parole. And Gatlinburg, shaken from its complacency, began to change. Local officials who had looked the other way for too long found themselves facing elections and losing. New leadership emerged, committed to transparency and accountability. Sarah's Bakery became a landmark. Tourists came not just for the pastries, but to meet the woman whose courage had sparked a transformation. 3 months after the trial, Sarah held a small ceremony at the bakery. It was invitation only. Elena was there, of course. So were Marcus's teammates, Deacon, Jester, and Spectre, who had flown in from their various posts. The mayor attended, as did the chief of police, both of them new to their positions. But the guests of honor were Liberty and Thor. Sarah had commissioned a local artist to create a sculpture, 2 dogs, side by side, one guiding, one protecting. It now stood in the small park across from the bakery, a permanent reminder of the bond between service dogs and those they protect. At the unveiling, Sarah spoke. She faced the crowd, Liberty at her side, and her voice was clear and strong. Liberty is my eyes. She gives me independence. But she's more than that. She's my partner. And when someone tried to take her from me, tried to hurt her, to hurt me, I learned something important. I learned that asking for help isn't weakness. It's strength. She turned toward where she knew Marcus was standing. Marcus Kane came into my life when I needed him most. He didn't just protect me. He showed me that there are still people who stand up when standing up is hard, who fight when fighting is necessary, who protect those who can't protect themselves. Marcus stood at the back, Thor at his side, uncomfortable with the attention but accepting it because it mattered to Sarah. And to Liberty and Thor, Sarah continued, you are more than animals. You are heroes. You serve without expectation of reward. You give without asking for anything in return. You are the best of us. The crowd applauded. Children came forward to pet Thor and Liberty, both dogs accepting the attention with dignified patience. After the ceremony, as people mingled and ate cake, Marcus and Sarah found themselves alone for a moment on the bakery's back porch. You did good, Marcus said. We did good, Sarah corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said something he'd been thinking about for weeks. My leave is up next month. I have to decide whether to extend or return to the teams. Sarah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. What are you going to decide? I'm thinking about retiring. 20 years is a good career. And I'm thinking maybe I'd like to stay in Tennessee. Open a security consulting business. Train service dogs. Maybe help other veterans transition. Sarah's smile lit up her face. That sounds like a good plan. Yeah? Yeah? Especially the part about staying in Tennessee. They stood together as the sun set over the mountains, Liberty and Thor at their feet, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Kane felt truly at peace. He had spent 20 years protecting strangers. Maybe it was time to protect the people he loved. 6 months later, Marcus and Sarah stood on the trail behind his cabin, now their cabin, watching the autumn leaves paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Liberty and Thor played in the clearing ahead, the 2 dogs having formed their own bond of mutual respect and affection. Marcus had officially retired from the Navy with full honors. He had opened Kane K9 Solutions, a training facility that specialized in preparing service dogs and providing security consulting. Veterans found their way to him, seeking purpose and guidance in transitioning from military to civilian life. Sarah had expanded the bakery, hiring 2 additional bakers and transforming it into a thriving business. She taught classes on adaptive baking techniques, showing others with disabilities that limitations were only temporary obstacles. Together, they had built something neither had expected to find, a family. Do you ever miss it? Sarah asked. The missions, the action. Marcus considered the question seriously. Sometimes there's an intensity to that life that's hard to explain. But this? He gestured at the peaceful valley, the dogs playing, the woman beside him. This is a different kind of mission, and it's the one that matters most. Sarah leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, for protecting me, for staying." "Always," Marcus replied. And in that moment, as the sun painted the sky and the dogs ran free, and the mountains stood eternal, Marcus Kane understood something profound. He had spent his life preparing for war. But it was in the quiet moments of peace, in the simple act of standing beside someone who needed him, that he had finally found his true purpose. He was a protector, not just of nations or missions, but of people, of dignity, of justice. And that was the greatest calling of all. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Was it Liberty's survival, Thor's partnership with Marcus, or the moment justice was finally served? We read every comment. May we all remember that in our darkest moments, sometimes a guardian appears not with fanfare or recognition, but with quiet strength and unwavering courage. And may we all aspire to be that guardian for someone who needs us. God bless, and see you in the next story.